You told him I would no longer be talked to like that. And for a second, it felt like you had stepped outside yourself. The sentence sounded simple, almost too simple for how much it carried, but it landed with weight. You didn't dress it up, you didn't soften it, you didn't explain it away like you might have done before. It came out whole, direct, and complete. And the moment it left your mouth, there was no pulling it back, no adjusting it to make it easier for him to hear. What made it what made it feel unbelievable was not just what happened next, but what didn't happen. You had expected resistance, maybe anger, maybe a sharp reply that would have forced you to either defend yourself or retreat. You were ready, at least in your head, for things to escalate. But instead, there was a pause that stretched just long enough for you to notice. He didn't interrupt you. He didn't dismiss you immediately. He didn't continue as if nothing had been said. He stopped. And in that pause, something shifted in a way you were not used to seeing. You stood there holding your ground in a quiet way, and it felt unfamiliar. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. There is a difference between the two, even though they can feel the same at first. For a long time, you had probably trained yourself to read situations quickly and respond in ways that kept things smooth. You learned how to avoid friction, how to adjust your tone, how to choose silence when speaking felt like it might cost you something. That kind of habit doesn't come from nowhere. It builds slowly, over time. But something about this moment refused to follow that script. You didn't calculate your words the way you usually do. You didn't weigh the consequences in advance. You just responded to what was happening in front of you. And you did it honestly. That honesty is what made the sentence land the way it did. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional in an obvious way, but it was firm in a way that left no room for confusion. He looked at you differently after that. Even if it was only for a moment, it wasn't necessarily respect right away, and it wasn't necessarily agreement, but it was attention, real attention. That kind that comes when someone realizes the dynamic they were used to is no longer guaranteed. People often continue patterns without thinking about them, especially if those patterns have never been challenged. When you finally challenge one, even quietly, it interrupts that automatic behavior. It forces a kind of awareness that wasn't there before. You might not have felt powerful in that moment. In fact, it's more likely you felt exposed. There is a certain vulnerability in speaking plainly, especially when you are not used to doing it. You are no longer hiding behind politeness or silence. You are visible in a different way, and that can feel risky. Your mind probably didn't go silent after you spoke. It likely started racing, questioning, replaying, trying to predict what would come next. That internal noise is part of the process. It doesn't cancel out what you did. If anything, it shows how new this way of responding is for you. Growth rarely feels smooth while it is happening. It feels uncertain sometimes, even uncomfortable, because you are stepping out of something familiar without fully knowing what will replace it. The surprising part is that the world did not collapse around you. The conversation didn't explode. You didn't lose control of the situation. Instead, things slowed down. That pause you witnessed was not just his reaction. It was the space created by your refusal to continue the old pattern. You gave the moment a different shape, and everything in it had to adjust, even if only slightly. It is important to understand that what you did was not about winning an argument or proving a point. You were not trying to dominate the conversation or force him into a certain response. You were simply defining what you would accept. That distinction matters because it changes the intention behind your words. You were not pushing against him. You were standing for yourself. Those two things can look similar on the surface, but they come from very different places. Afterward, you might have replayed the moment more than once. You might have wondered if you sounded too firm or not firm enough. You might have thought about how it could have gone differently or whether you should have added more explanation. That kind of reflection is natural, especially when you do something that breaks your usual pattern. Your mind is trying to make sense of it, to fit it into your understanding of how you behave. But the truth is, the strength of what you said came from its simplicity. You didn't need to justify, you didn't need to build a case or provide examples. The sentence stood on its own because it was clear. Clarity does not need decoration. In fact, adding too much can weaken it because it shifts the focus away from the boundary itself and into explanation. What you may start to notice if you pay attention is that this one moment doesn't stay isolated. It begins to influence how you see other situations. You start to recognize the early signs of discomfort instead of waiting until it builds up. You become more aware of your reactions, not in a critical way, but in a curious one. You begin to ask yourself whether something actually sits right with you, instead of automatically adjusting to make it work. That awareness changes how you respond, even in small ways. You may not always say the same sentence, and you don't need to. What matters is the shift behind it, the willingness to speak when something crosses a line, even if that line is still becoming clear to you. You don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to respond immediately every time. But once you have experienced that moment of speaking honestly, it becomes harder to ignore yourself completely. It is also possible that not every situation will end with the same kind of pause you saw this time. Some people may react differently. They may question you, push back, or even dismiss what you say. That does not undo what you did. The value of speaking up is not measured by how smoothly the other person responds. It is measured by whether you stay true to what you felt in that moment. What made this experience stand out is that it showed you something you hadn't fully believed before. You can speak without everything falling apart. You can set a boundary without turning the situation into a conflict. You can be calm and still be firm. Those realizations don't come from thinking about them. They come from living them, even once. The sentence you said may seem small when written down, but it marked a shift in how you relate to yourself. You moved from enduring to responding, from adjusting to defining. That shift does not announce itself loudly, and it does not instantly solve everything, but it changes the direction you are moving in. When you look back at that moment, the unbelievable part may not just be that he stopped. It may be that you didn't. You didn't stop. You didn't stop yourself from speaking. You didn't step back into silence the way you might have done before. You stayed with your words long enough for them to exist in the space between you. This is where the real change happened, not in his reaction, but in your decision to let your voice be heard without taking it back.